everybody. Welcome to another episode of Chasing Frets. I'm joined this week by Andy Ellis. How are you, Andy?
I am doing well, thank you.
And today's episode, we're going to talk all about Jim Hall with Julian Lage. And Jim Hall was a real important mentor and hero to Julian. And when was the first time, Andy, that you first got into Jim Hall?
I got into Jim Hall a little bit later than Wes Montgomery and Kenny Burrell. Those were my gateways into jazz guitar. But every time I asked someone about jazz guitar, they said, you got to listen to Jim Hall. So I was probably a senior in high school.
It does. It seems like no matter what branch of jazz guitar you might start on, the trunk leads to Wes, Django, Charlie, and Jim.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, it was probably in college. He wasn't the first jazz guitar player I heard, but he shortly became my favorite because my teacher at the time, James McGuire, was a big fan, and I remember transcribing solos of his in college. And from then on, and then I got to see him in college, which I kind of tell the story of in the episode today, and got to meet him briefly. And since then, I've been a diehard Jim Hall fan. There's definitely, and even when I remember when Julian would be writing a column for us, there'd be times where we would have these calls to plan out topics or whatever, and they would shortly kind of divert into Jim Hall Appreciation Hour, because at the time. And we didn't really get too much into this, but Jim and Julian formed a band together, like a quartet, and they played some gigs. And so Julian today shares some great stories about growing up and seeing Jim and playing with him later on, and that are even ones I'd never heard Julian kind of talk about before. So check out today's episode, and we'll be back with everybody again on Friday. Today's episode of Chasing Frets is brought to you by Collings Guitars, and more specifically their new 470 JL that was designed in collaboration with Julian Lage. It's an entirely new hollow body design that Julian and the crew at Collings Guitars have been working on for years. It was designed from the ground up to have the feel, tonal range, and aesthetic qualities that were exciting to both Julian and the crew at Collings. The guitar features Ron Ellis Dynasonic pickups, a Bigsby B3 tremolo, and a unique trestle block construction that was developed by Collings. The 470 JL will be released officially in January and will be available to order through authorized Collings dealers. So head on over to collingsguitars.com and check it out. All right, Julian, welcome back. And today I'm so excited to talk about this topic with you and this guitar player with you, because you and I have had conversations about him over the years.
Yeah.
And you've had quite a few full circle moments with him, and that's the great Jim Hall.
Oh, the master.
Yeah.
Ultimate master.
And it seems like everybody I know who has met Jim in some kind of way has a fun story. And one story that I remember you telling me that I want you to kind of retell is the first time you saw him at Yoshi's when you were a kid.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, this still blows my mind. I was about 11 years old, and I was at the time, you know, one of my greatest teachers is Randy Vincent, one of the great guitar players and jazz guitar players and educators, and since we've worked together when I was way young, he's written some great books that I highly recommend to anyone and everyone looking to get into the world of jazz guitar and just a deeper understanding of the instrument. So from the time I was about 8 until I was 12, I studied about, I took 2-3 hour long lessons a week with him. We were like bonded, right? And we would just play, practice. And Jim Hall was always kind of the guy, no surprise, that we would continually circle back to. If there was a month where we were just looking at comping, well, Jim Hall. If we were just looking at thematic development, well, Jim Hall. If we were just looking at how to work with bass players, well, Jim Hall. So he
was the North Star.
He was for everything.
Yeah.
He was consistently the North Star, and there were so many masters right next to him. But Jim had a special place in our imagination. We'd always just kind of think about him and talk about him. Randy's wife, Kathy, is wonderful, wonderful, dear person to me. The two of them would always be on the lookout for excuses to take me to Yoshi's in Oakland. And it was great. So I'd go with the two of them. We'd see a lot of shows, and I'll never forget getting the calendar in the mail, and it said whatever to whatever, Jim Hall Trio. And ironically, it was with Scott Colley and Kenny Wollesen. That was the trio who later became my trio. But that was a kind of a rare tour because Scott played a lot with Jim, Kenny less so. But okay, we're going. So Randy, Kathy, myself, and my parents, I believe, I think it was all of us. We go, get tickets, show up opening night, where it's packed, and we're at the front of the stage. Basically, I'm almost on stage. I'm leaning my arms on the edge of the stage, which I now, having done shows like that, seeing people in the front, I realize it can feel like you're being encroached upon. So I was this little kid, must look real weird, having my head stick out over the edge of the stage. And the show's about to start. There's about 5 minutes there until it starts, and Jim walks out of the side door, and everyone in the audience kind of takes note, and he's kind of looking around, kind of squinting, looking for somebody clearly. And my dad very sweetly said, "Oh, I bet he's looking for you." And I said, I laughed, but it was very, very nice gesture and sentiment. And so we're just kind of watching him like a spectacle. And sure enough, Jim walks through the entire audience, quite awkwardly, I must say, because we're packed in there. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. He's getting his all the way, literally, to our table. And he says, "Hi, are you Julian?" I said, "Yeah." Blah, blah, blah.
You're going,
"Oh my God, I was on the floor. I was dead." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, our mutual friend, Dr. Herb Wong, told me you would be here." Now, if you don't know, Dr. Herb Wong was a really wonderful writer, educator, kind of advocate for the jazz community in the Bay Area for many, many years. And I believe he produced records and wrote liner notes for a lot of our favorite people. And I knew Herb through the Stanford Jazz Workshop and from some other connections. And he had told Jim there's this little kid. Presumably he said, "You can't miss him. He's obsessed with you. It would mean a lot if you said hello." And that's what transpired. And Jim said, "Well, I'm so glad you're here, and I hope you enjoy the show, and I'll see you after." And he walked backstage, went on stage to the show. It was unbelievable. And I think it speaks to his character greatly, just nothing but goodness, What transpired after was, we saw him again a couple more times that week. One of the days we came in early, so my mom and I think we met him for coffee at the club, and he just talked, and then that began kind of a long distance relationship that really was wonderful for many years until I moved to New York. We started playing together, and we became quite close.
I gotta ask, looking back, do you think your dad kind of knew?
I don't think he knew.
You don't?
At all.
Okay.
No, he would have. My. It's a great question. My parents. I come from a deeply supportive family, right? And my mom and dad and we've always been very fortunate to kind of move as a unit, through these different circles, socially speaking, and in the musical scene. Like, I'm a kid. I went from them protecting me as a kid to them supporting me as an adult. And it's really special. Really, really special. In that particular case, I think it was one of those great examples of us all being fans. There's no dog in the race. It's just, you're going to go see the master. You're going to go to the show. Herb Wong, I think he had a little devious side where he was trying to keep it a secret, and man, it worked. It changed my life. Simply put, that event alone.
Because I'm saying, as a dad, if I kind of knew, if Herb had tipped Dad off, that's exactly what I would have said.
You would have said it.
He's probably looking for you, kid.
Yeah.
And I probably would have lived with that secret for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Well, I think if so, that's awesome. It's a good dad thing.
So I have a Jim Hall, Julian Lage story that, Julian, you don't know.
Great.
And it connects into everything that you have just said.
Great.
So in the early aughts, I attended a luthier convention, either in Amherst or here in Nashville. It rotated through. And I was walking down the hallway in the hotel where this convention was being held, and there were banquet rooms with musicians playing,
Yeah.
And it was guitar, because it's guitar lutherie.
Yeah.
And so I passed this one banquet room, and there's this delightful, beautiful, spirited guitar coming out of it. So I swing my head in and poke my head in, and I'm stunned because suddenly I see there are 3 guitarists on stage, 2 adults and 1 young guy. And this young guy had his head tilted, cocked at a particular angle that makes it look as if to the observer that I gave it away, that the guitarist is listening to the strings, not looking at the fretboard, not staring at the fingers, but listening to the strings, bent slightly listening to the fretboard, but gazed away, just listening. And I said, oh my God, that's the guitarist I saw at the 2000 Grammys playing with the teenage band, the young kids band playing the jazz ensemble.
Oh, that's great.
And I've been trying to figure out who this guitarist was, but it's got to be because of this tilt I recognized of this way of addressing the guitar.
Right.
So I turn to 2 people who are standing in the doorway next to me, and I say, do you have any idea who this guitarist is? And they say, yes, this is Julian Lage. And we're his parents. And I said, this really gets interesting too. It tells a lot about what you were saying about your family dynamic because I say, I've been trying to find out who this guitarist was. Here's my card.
Yeah.
I was senior editor at Guitar Player magazine at the time. Here's my card. I would really like to do a feature on Julian in the magazine.
Yeah.
And I think it was your dad. He took the card. He was very courteous. Oh, thank you. That's nice. He said, but Julian has his own pace of doing things, and we'll just let him know about this and let him see it unfold.
Yeah.
And he says, right now, he is very happy in his bedroom with stacks of vinyl, but right now he's transcribing Jim Hall, and that's what he really loves to do is transcribe Jim Hall. And so I said, "Oh, that's so cool." Great. And so then we stood there and listened to the rest of the music.
Yeah.
But the point that I came away with is that your parents were very chill about this. Most parents I call it the tennis prodigy syndrome. When the parent realizes the child has talent in a particular field and then pushes the child because the parents gleefully rub their hands and goes, oh, yes, we can make money, we can further this thing. And he was kind of going, well, that's nice, senior editor of Guitar Player magazine, but, don't hold your breath. He didn't say it that way. He was very courteous, but I realized that this wasn't going to happen right now.
Oh, that is so heavy, man. It's such a that's an incredible story. Because it does speak to, and that was my experience as a young person. Was I was very encouraged and supported, but I'm the youngest of 5 children. So there was a lot of attention that was needed with my. Towards my 4 siblings, and they're all doing wonderful things. So, in a lot of respects, the kind of anthropological function of me being a guitar player in the family was it meant I could kind of step out of the fray. You know what I mean? It wasn't to bring me more center stage. It was while they're doing their wonderful things, I'm going to go practice. And I think my parents recognized that it's a unit. It's a family unit. It's not just that. Also, furthermore, my father was a very prodigious visual artist as a young boy, growing up in Southern California. He was, 12 and he had a one-man show of all his stuff. And he was, and he's still an unbelievable artist. And he had a lot of attention at a young age for being young and doing something well. And it turned him off. He didn't want that, So I think keeping that in mind too, and in my mother's, deep spiritual, just, brilliance about just kind of it's some other level stuff, some very high vibrating stuff. I think combined, they just, I don't think they have the capacity to see it as anything other than something you nurture. It's funny even talking about it in this time and place. It's like, this is all so long before YouTube and the ways you had to work to exploit yourself a little differently, And so I feel very grateful to have kind of grown up in a kind of in hiding in a way, with a little bit of a hermetic tinge to my whole existence.
And you're probably one of the last generations to be able to do that.
I would imagine so.
What a good point.
Yeah, because it kind of changed. Yeah,
how many 8-year-olds are there playing ridiculous solos on YouTube?
So great. I mean, there's I watch it. I watch cats. It's amazing, but it wasn't even. Put it this way, my sense as a young person was so cool to practice guitar now because, God willing, this can be like a head start for what I want to do as an adult. It was the focus was never. It was like, can I just grow up so I can do this for real? Can I grow up so I can do it for real? And I recognize that a young person today and their families, everyone has different needs, and maybe it is appropriate and good for them to kind of be out there making records as a young person. I'm the last person to talk about that, but reflecting upon it now with you guys, I feel lucky that I was a secret, and that story kind of sums up how most of my childhood felt.
By the time you moved to New York and started to become friends with Jim, you'd spend all that time transcribing and comping, and you had a certain amount of the nuts and bolts already in your blood. During that time you were living in New York and were hanging out with Jim, what was a big musical lesson you learned during that time by getting to know him better?
Wow. Well, there's a handful. I mean, there's Jim's. Anybody knows knew Jim, I frankly think you hear it on the record. So whether you knew him or not doesn't change this. But he was very intelligent and very funny. And if you were around him, he didn't want to talk about the guitar, really, And so he would talk about politics, and he would talk about, other artists that he thought were really fascinating, or, but it was very clear that the guitar, similar to this notion that by the time you play it, it's too late to do anything about what you played. I think he saw music as kind of the cherry on top of the person. So you just cultivate, friendships, good conversation, read good books, really be a kind of be a person who happens to have a guitar in their hand. That was kind of his sentiment. So moving to New York, that was comforting because it gave me the sense that everything I experience is now there's no choice, but it's going to enter the music. So have a rich life, Another thing, and it'll get more guitar specific here in a second, but another thing that I thought was really, really helpful as a life lesson was I would, early on in my time with Jim, going to his house or going out to lunch or whatever, naturally I would say, I'd find an appropriate moment and I'd say, Jim, what was your experience of recording Undercurrent with Bill Evans? Or what was, do you remember if you had reverb on that, or did you mic the guitar? And I'd find or what about Sonny? And he was a gentleman, so he would always answer in one way or another, but eventually, or in short order, he would make the statement and express the fact that the 50s and 60s were terrible. And he was not in the mood to glorify them. And what I mean by that was it didn't occur to me until I was with him, but like he was in one of the earlier, very deeply popular and legendary integrated bands, Sonny Rollins Group, or his work with Ella Fitzgerald, or his work with Art Farmer, and he was witnessing a reality in which systemic racism was so unbelievably blatant, and he couldn't go in the same entrance as Sonny Rollins to the same club they're playing, and I think he was tormented by this. So anytime I would bring up something that to me was just something about the, quote unquote golden era of jazz and Jim Hall, he would just be like, please don't romanticize it. It's not good. We need to not look back. And so he'd, famously say, the past is a great place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. And that was, it was kind of like note taken. Who cares what Mike, I actually still care, but it does, that's not how we're going to spend our time together. Roger that.
Yeah.
So that was huge. I'll offer one more mechanistic thing about the guitar. I remember one of the times playing with him early on where he was really fond of detuning his guitar and then playing free. Like he would ask me to detune it for him. So he'd say, just almost like a for the sake of it being legitimately random, he'd say, "Here, can you detune this for me?" So I go, bum, 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 bum. We'd play free, it'd be amazing, and force him to play new things, and it was just a study in presence, right? Then he'd say, "Okay, can you tune it up again?" And so I tune it back up to standard, and we'd play a tune. And I remember one of the first times we played a song, unplugged, I had an arch top. I guess I was playing the man's arch top that I have, and he was playing his Sadowski. I was blown away by how hard he played. He played so loud. Think like Charlie Christian downstroke, bump, 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 like really percussive. And I was shocked.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked because I had this notion that Jim Hall's recorded sound and even live is this warm, gentle, like really delicate thing. And in a moment, I kind of saw, what's really happening is he's driving the guitar with authority, and this pickup and this arch top and that amp and everything, when it's all plugged in, compresses the hell out of it, right? And then years later, I remember playing through his old Gibson that our mutual friend Brian Camilio has, which is the one, the GA-25, I think. Or 20, the one that's on all the records, the brown with the. And I remember playing through that amp and realizing that you couldn't really get a great sound out of it unless you play really hard. If I would kind of do this subtle whatever stuff, you just heard nothing, So I was really cool seeing how the equipment of the era informed his technique, and that you could still have gentility but have authority. Mm-hmm. That was a big thing that I got from being in person.
That totally clicks with me because I only got to see him live one time, and it was at the Blue Note. And it was him and Charlie Haden duo. Wow. And, he comes walking up on stage and Charlie's playing and Jim's plugged into like a polytone or something.
Sure.
But the amp was totally off. And I was probably sitting in that same spot you were sitting at Yoshi's.
Yeah.
Where my nose is sitting right on the stage. And he didn't even turn the volume on his guitar up. And you're playing to a club and upright bass, and Charlie has a massive tone.
Of course.
And I heard, you felt like you were just sitting in a living room. Yeah. And these guys are using the acoustic properties of their instrument to project this sound,
Right. God,
and it was
so cool. That is so
good. It was so good. And later that night, I took my wife Cindy up because the bathroom is upstairs,
Yeah,
so we're leaving. We go to the bathroom upstairs. I didn't know that's where also the dressing rooms were at. And we're standing there. And a door, and so Cindy I'm waiting for her. She's in the bathroom, and this door to the right opens, and there's Jim. And I'm just like, he must have I'm just staring. And I happen to have a copy of Jim Hall Live in my pocket.
Oh, wow.
And he comes and he's finishing talking to whoever, and he looks at me. I was like, Mr. Hall. He's like, oh, come on in. And so we go in to his dressing room, and then he closes the door. So it's just him and I sitting in, and Cindy is still in. Still in, and then the door opens and Charlie Haden walks in, and he closes the door and he's sitting down, and I'm from Iowa and Charlie's from Iowa. It's like, hey man, how you doing? And it's Charlie Haden thing, and we talk.
Of course.
And then it really kind of dawns on me, oh my gosh, I left my girlfriend in the hallway. She probably has no clue where I'm at.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the door kind of peeks open, and she sticks her head in. And Jim and Charlie just look at me, and they were kind of like, who is this random woman?
Yeah, what's happening?
It's like, oh no, she's with me, guys. So she come in and hang, and he was cool. He signed my stuff, asked me by Iowa, and I remember him asking me, "You play guitar?" I said, "Yeah, I play guitar." And what are you working on? What are you playing? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. So cool. I'm thinking to myself, it doesn't matter, Jim Hall. Yeah. It really not in this moment. But I saw I'm working on this and that, and he's like, and I said, yeah, and I have one of your books, and he's like, oh man, that's so great that you dig that and this and that, and it was cool. And then neither one of them rushed me out, they were between sets or whatever, and then I kind of just was like, thank you guys, and walked out, and it was we immediately took a taxi to the Iridium to see Pat Martino the same night. It was a big night.
Amazing.
It was a big night.
That's a huge night. Wow, so, I love that.
So to wrap up, Julian, if somebody who's listening to this podcast, familiar with your music but hasn't quite gone down the Jim Hall rabbit hole, give me 3 albums that they should download from Spotify, iTunes, whatever, today.
Absolutely. Well,
It's an impossible question, I know, but
it's the impossible question. The three Jim Hall Live, as you mentioned, is one of the great records ever, and it captures, in my opinion, Jim in a very well. This isn't an opinion; it's the truth. I believe it's a hotel lobby with Terry Clark and Don
Thompson.
Yep. Thank you. And I think Don or Terry recorded all of it themselves on a, some tape recorder. So it's capturing a night after night, recording of these cats who are just playing so well together. And it paints a very clear picture of how badass Jim Hall is. Definitely. My favorite record, just as a human being in the world, since I was very young, has been Undercurrent, which is Jim Hall and Bill Evans, recorded on Blue Note, and they did 2 records together. Duo Intermodulation was the other one, but Undercurrents, to me, that's worth a listen. It speaks to Jim Hall's just mastery on the instrument, but also his interaction with Bill, and the music making is just the highest level, and it's kind of not like any other jazz record I know of, really. And it happens to be Jim Hall. Third, it's kind of a tie for what the next one you should listen to after that is. I would say either Concerto, which is a really, really cool record from Jim's days on CTI. So it's a little bit more produced, and he's just tackling bigger compositions. The Aranez, how do you say it? I always say his name wrong. Concerto de Aranez. He's tackling a version of that, but there's also so many other great songs on it. But it's kind of just Jim in a different era, a little like more produced, I'd say. It's a tie between that and also Jim's first record, his very first record, which has
is it just called Jazz Guitar?
I think it's just called Jazz Guitar, and that I kind of felt like he never made that record again, which I guess is not uncommon for people's first records. You kind of move on, right? But those 3 together, I think, would give you a really incredible picture. And we're not even talking about all the stuff with Ron Carter and all the later stuff with where he did writing for strings, because he's one of the great composers. So those 3 will get you off to the races.
And I would say few things are as enjoyable as putting in the left earbud and playing The Bridge by Sonny Rollins. So you just hear
That's
Jim.
Amazing.
And you're just like, ooh.
Oh my God. We were just blasting that in the car 2 days ago. That track, it's unbelievable.
It's so good. Without a song.
Oh man.
Get out of here.
It's a masterclass in how to be a great guitar player.
All right, Julian, it's been so much to catch up with you and share Jim stories, and looking forward to having you back later this week, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Take care.